Welcome back to another week of Therapists Uncut. Myself, Nikki Young, here with my fantastic and fabulous co-host, entrepreneur extraordinaire. I'm going to add that to your introduction. Alyssa, Najera, licensed clinical social worker.
Thank you.
Are you going to pay me for that intro? Because I feel like that was a pretty solid intro.
If we got paid, I would pay you, Nikki. But we do this out of the kindness of our hearts to give you guys, hopefully, some good smiles and some good information at times. So what are we talking about today?
We are talking about all of the goodness that is out there, because we recognize that even for ourselves, it's easy to get sucked into the negativity, right? And only see what's wrong with the world, just everything out there that's icky. All right, so we ourselves, actually, here we're going to throw ourselves under the bus here. Last recording day, we thought, hey, this would be a great episode idea. And we looked at each other and we're like, shit, we can only think of an example or two of kindness that we've seen in the world over the last week. So that was our own mindset. So we took some time to kind of pay more attention to the goodness around us. And that's what we're here to talk with you all about today.
Welcome to the Therapists Uncut Podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young and Alyssa Najera.
So because we tried to start this topic at a previous recording and it really went nowhere, Nikki and I decided to practice some intentionality and really up our gratitude game to try to bring you guys some small moments or even large gestures of goodness and kindness, because the world is full of lots of experiences right now.
The world is a complicated place.
And as humans, we have what's called ancient brains, which means we immediately go to the negative. Everything we don't like, we don't want, we don't need. And it's so easy to talk about that. But it takes intention and it takes focus, I think, to be able to identify the things that are actually working well and that we are grateful for. So Nikki and I would really like to focus on that today if you guys would like to join us.
And we would like you to chime in, right? So leave comments, share what goodness you're seeing in the world. And it's okay if you need to spend a week to shift your focus and actually observe these things and not just focus on the Karens out there and such. Take that time and then let us know. What are you seeing? Let's start this conversation. Let's see some good out there.
And let's start this episode with a little reflection, whether you're listening to us at your desk, on your drive, at home. Just take 10 seconds to think about, gosh, what have I noticed lately or observed or experienced that was just really nice and really cool?
You can even pause us as long as you press play again.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Nikki?
Can I start with one that has stuck with me? This is actually the example that stood out to me last recording day that I wanted to share, but, embarrassingly, that was the only example that stood out to me, but it is still stuck with me and I really wanted to share it. So, I don't know, it's probably been a couple months now. I was taking our youngest to school and I was coming up. I could see somebody kind of pulled off the side of the road. Now, it was in town. It was in a residential area and they had their hazards on, flashing. So, I knew something was going on up there. And then as I got closer, I saw that there was a woman on the side of the road that's on the sidewalk that had a shopping cart that looked like it had maybe tipped over with what I'm assuming was kind of like all of her possessions in it. And she looked like she had been houseless for a period of time. And there was this Mercedes pulled over. And I realized that the driver had gotten out and was helping this woman put everything back into her cart. And I slowed down as it was getting closer so that I didn't scare them and I could merge over and get out of their way and such. But as I got closer, this woman, the driver of this Mercedes, had kind of put the last item back in this woman's cart, and she went to walk away, and the woman said something, I couldn't hear what happened, and they totally shared this long hug. Now, granted, this speaks to the COVID times that we're in, because I had a surge of panic of ooh, COVID, no. But two strangers can't hug. But it was the coolest thing that I have seen in such a long time. And they both just shared this genuine human moment together. And I don't know, it stuck with me months. I still think about it regularly. It was awesome.
And as Nikki's talking, I'm thinking of another story that she shared with me when she and I first met, which was back in group. And if you guys have been listening to our episodes since day one, you know that Nikki and I met in what was this training group, basically, for when you become a licensed therapist. And that's when we shared lots of connections and lots of stories. So I might challenge you to share that later.
I don't know what you're talking about, so you might have to share it.
Oh, I can't wait. Okay. But I'm going to pull out something that stuck out as Nikki was speaking. It was the concept of humanity. I feel like humanity is just getting lost sometimes in the small moments. But if we are intentional about controlling ourselves, what we say, what we do, our own behaviors and responses and our own choices, imagine how much goodness and humanity we can bring to the world in the moments that we can. There's lots of things out of our control, right? But there's lots of things within our control. Like this woman who, wait, did you say woman?
Did I don't know what you're talking about. So.
Oh, wait, now we're talking about the story you said. Mercedes. The person in the Mercedes.
Yes, it was two women.
Like when this person in the Mercedes took the time to stop and just help another human being. Yeah. They very likely didn't know each other before that moment. But imagine the difference that one person could make. Imagine the difference that you, as this one person, have made on somebody recently. Or the difference that one person has made on you. Mm-hmm. There's just so many moments. And I'm gonna hold my story. I'm so excited
because it sounds like I told a really good story, and I don't remember what it was.
Nikki's a great storyteller. Okay, so
wait, time out. Did you just say that I am a great storyteller?
You are.
Okay, so there's some background to that. I am shocked to hear you say that. But that means that some of my friends and family listening can know that they've done a fantastic job, because I was not historically known as a great storyteller. In fact, when I would start to tell a story, people would roll their eyes and say, oh, God, here we go. I got training from several friends. I almost feel like I should identify them by name and give them a shout out, but you know who you are. Like, you sat me down and talked me through. It was during grad school, so maybe my brain was just on overload. It was post-concussion, so maybe that played into it, but I could not for the life of me tell a story from start to finish. Like, I would kind of finish and teeter off, and I'd be like, that was the story. So apparently their hard work has paid off.
It has definitely paid off, which is probably why you're listening.
Although my wife has a look on her face right now that maybe I'm not quite as great as Alyssa says. So maybe in public situations, I still put a lot of focus into it. Maybe at home, my stories are still subpar.
One day we're just going to have our behind the scenes video right next to us, so that way you can see what we see
faces
as we're recording. It really is a great time, and we're so happy you decided to join us. All right. Yeah. All right, going back to Nikki. Actually, I'm going to shift to me. Because I'm going to come back to
go for it.
I'm going to come back to Nikki. So when we did our last recording, we truly were almost embarrassed to say we actually can't roll with this today, because we need to be more intentional about where our brains have been going, so that way we can actually see the things that have been happening. Likely have been happening all around us, but maybe we've chosen not to see them. So I would like to start with small gestures. Right now, with all of the policy changes, with all of the state, government, county changes that are happening on like a week-to-week basis, it can feel like there's so much chaos, especially in the school system. School systems are completely like just trying to keep their heads above water.
One foot in front of the other.
Put one foot, one day at a time, right? Mm-hmm. And that has the opportunity to result in feeling dysregulated and feeling like I'm constantly living in chaos. So I'm going to shout out to my kids' school right now, because one of the greatest things that we appreciate the most is that every time we drop our kid off at school, every single staff person has a smile on their face, greets her, usually by name, asks how she's doing, and verbalizes how excited and happy they are that she's there today. Can you imagine what that does for a 5-year-old?
And for all of you educators out there listening, I mean, that one, you felt that, right? Because how hard is it right now to put that smile on your face when you know everything that, one, you're dealing with in a classroom, and two, everything that's going on structurally that you're having to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. Or with it. Yeah. So kudos to you, because that we know is not easy.
It's not.
We appreciate it.
And if you are the person who is putting a smile on your face, despite all of the personal things happening at home, despite all of the organizational policies that are coming down your way, you have the ability to make such an impact, especially during this time. And I kind of hate when people say, especially during this time, now more than ever. I don't know why. That's probably my own issues around that. But I am going to say this feels appropriate. Right now, if all you did was smile and say hello and greet a student by their name, maybe ask how they're doing, It means so much. And my husband and I recognize that for our little girl. She made me not see how big that is right now, but it's a beautiful thing to feel like this school, it doesn't even feel like there's this pandemic happening because they're executing and delivering so well for their students. And fortunately, mine's one of them. So that was something that I noticed that really stuck with me recently.
And because we are programmed the way we are programmed, we find it very easy to notice that one day that we showed up and somebody was frowning or crabby when we interacted with them. Even if it was one example out of 100, right? We remember that, but we don't. We struggle to recognize the 99 other circumstances in which somebody showed up with a smile on their face or kindness in their tone. So it's really shifting that focus and noticing those moments.
And even verbalizing. Now that I'm saying it, I realize I've never actually told my kid's teacher how much that means to me as a parent. So I will definitely challenge myself to make it a point and verbalize that to them because it is the small kindness that really sticks with us.
Yeah, it's what creates our culture, right? Culture of kindness. All right, so I like Alyssa's point of starting with kind of the small moments that we've seen. I can't even remember exactly the situation, but I was in a coffee shop recently, and somebody paid for the next person's coffee. All right, and just the small things like that. And for others, it may not be a small thing, right? To spend an extra $8 on somebody's coffee might be a very large thing, so I don't want to minimize that. But just the random acts of kindness towards strangers goes a long way, right? That starts that person's day off with a smile on their face and a reminder of humanity.
As you say, the coffee shop, I am thinking of a story that came across my social media feed one day from a sorority sister of mine. And I'm going to say shout out to the sorority sister because you don't know I'm using this yet, but I'll tell you, don't worry. But she was talking about how she took her kids to this coffee shop drive-thru before school. And as she's pulling in, this like SUV comes in and like cuts her off to get into this drive-thru, right? And it's kind of like, really, is it going to make much of a difference? But whatever. So she rolls with it and she's observing the interactions and what she can gather from these interactions is that there's a parent and maybe a teenage daughter, teenage son, I don't remember, in the passenger seat. And you can visually see that they are having a discussion that might be heated. It might have been a heated discussion because she described like body movements and facial expressions.
Or maybe they were just Greek.
Right. I don't know because we talked about that. Greek. That's the thing in Greek, right? So this could have been interpreted like wrong the entire time. And I don't remember I can't remember how this happened because I'm pretty sure this person cut them off. But ultimately, she figured out a way to connect with this driver and either purchase their meal or I don't know how she did it. But she said, you know what? Obviously, this person is having a hard day. Getting in there before me means more to them than me right now. Like, I got time. And I'm just going to show some grace anyways. And somehow, and literally as I'm talking about this out loud, I don't even know how she did this, but she did. She paid for their coffee or their meal and their food. Like, who decides to pay for the person who is probably, like, pissing you off because they just cut you off or gave you the wrong look or is using the wrong tone with you? And it was like...
But how... Is that a chance to intervene and reset that person's day, right? You have no idea what's going on with them.
No idea.
And this takes me back to our road rage episode, right? We get cut off on the freeway, and we're very quick, myself included, to be like, what the heck? You suck. You can't drive. Da-da-da-da-da. In fact, we took a trip out of town recently, and I don't know what it was about this town, but in my irritated brain, I decided nobody in this town can drive, right? But... We don't know. Continue. No, it takes me back to our road rage episode. We don't know what's going on in that person's day. Maybe the individual that just cut us off on the freeway, maybe their spouse or girlfriend is in labor and they're about to miss the birth, or maybe somebody's in the hospital and you're trying to get to the emergency room. I mean, granted, if you drive like an asshole, you could wind up yourself in the emergency room on the way, so maybe don't. But you don't know, right? And so your friend finding a way. You know, logistically, that was pretty impressive. But being able to do that, that's awesome. And maybe that reset that person's whole day.
Absolutely. So just being considerate of the small moments where you have the opportunity to intervene, or not even intervene, where you have the opportunity to refrain from reacting and contributing to this negative environment.
Refrain from reacting. I like that.
Yeah, I think we can all, I'm looking at, because I definitely did not refrain in one instance over the last few weeks. So I think we have all been in that moment where, and my husband's laughing right now because he knows exactly what it was. But I think we have all been in that moment where you have the choice to either react and engage in a very uncontrolled way, or you have the choice to maybe walk away or say nothing because you know that if you say something, it's not going to be kind.
And that is a reaction. I'm going to argue that you're not refraining from reacting. You're just choosing a different reaction.
You're choosing to respond instead of react. So I think we're going to challenge you to choose to respond more often instead of reacting from heightened emotions, because it's your responses sometimes that really stick with people. I mean, when I was at we went to a theme park. We went on a family vacation for my son's birthday, and we went to a theme park, very prominent theme park in California that's known for being either awesome or complete chaos, because there's children running around everywhere and everybody's nap times are disrupted and kids are hungry and we have to wait in line for 3 hours. That was an exaggeration, but there are long lines. And I was sitting outside of an attraction where they had this theme park is so good at using like scents that they put out throughout the park and sounds to help you find the ambiance. And it worked in this case because I was sitting on the bench while my kid was on the stroller resting. We're waiting. We're there for like 40 minutes. And I've got this like therapeutic, meditative music in the background and probably some great scents of lavender, who knows what this theme park is putting out. And I'm sitting and I made it a choice to just sit and observe, not be on my phone, not read a book, and just be present in the moment. And it was kind of beautiful, the things that I was able to observe. It kind of brings me back to, if you guys listen to the episode in our first season around when California experienced those shutdowns, and I said the beauty there was in hearing somebody else's voice that wasn't a member of my family because we were so isolated for a while. It almost felt like that. Being able to observe humanity and kindness as people were passing, and sometimes chaotically, passing through, but people were being polite. They were saying, excuse me, sorry. People were like, oh, don't worry about it. I understand, bro. Like, you're good. Because there's literally kids running around everywhere. Being able to observe that it really felt magical. And I think this is the power of this theme park with the marketing, because I use magical to describe it.
Talk about psychology.
They're so good at it. But it was a beautiful series of moments to take in just the basic humanity and kindness and how it goes such a long way. Yeah. So that was another moment that I recognized.
I love it. You can even observe it in the grocery store if you pay attention, right? Instead of getting frustrated that the lines are long or whatnot, focus on people's interaction, right? Just having conversations with somebody that's obviously maybe not your immediate neighbor, but clearly they live somewhere nearby you, and just having a conversation with them. I feel like I've seen that a lot. Yeah. And there's a guy in our neighborhood that I've noticed probably subconsciously for a while now, but when he goes on his morning and evening walks, I realize he takes a grocery bag with him, and just any spare dog poop that maybe an owner didn't scoop up, or trash that I'm going to choose to assume that most of our neighbors don't litter, but that flies out somebody's window unintentionally and lands on the sidewalk or whatnot. But he scoops it up on his walk, and it's so cool because he's going to take his walk for his own personal enjoyment, and why not better his community in the process.
I'm going to go back to Nikki now.
Okay, I was wondering, I don't want it to go back to me, but I'm really curious.
I think it's a beautiful story to end on.
I still don't know what you're talking about, so I'm super, super intrigued.
This must have been about, I'm over here hitting the table, my bad. This must have been about 2016, 2017. Nikki still had a Silverado truck that was blue. And it was in this truck that she was driving around downtown, one of the prominent cities in our state, because Nikki, no, she wasn't driving around town because she lost the keys to her truck.
I know where you're going.
Look how I'm filling in stories. That information that doesn't even make sense. So she was walking around town because the night prior, she lost the keys to her beautiful truck. Like, this was Nikki's pride and joy from what I recall. So I would love for you to share that story with our listeners today. In a nutshell, because apparently we're running out of time.
This was an awesome day. I now know what you're talking about. This was honestly probably one of the coolest days of my life. The night before, I had met some friends from college, and we'd gotten together for dinner, and we just gotten together to catch up. And it was in the town where we had gone to college, and I had driven with friends. Well, apparently at some point in the process that evening, I lost my keys. I didn't drive, so I didn't realize that I lost my keys until I got home. At that point, it was late. It's too late to figure it out that night. No, I didn't even realize. I didn't even realize that night because my roommate had keys. So I didn't realize it till the next day when I got up to go to work, and I didn't have a key to my truck to go to work. So this is not uncommon for me to misplace my keys. I misplaced them on the way here. I now have the Apple, shout out plug, Apple AirTag. I use it at least 4 times a week to find my keys. So kind of assumed it was one of those situations, but looked in all the normal places, couldn't find it. And then, when you just have this dawning realization of, oh shit, I know exactly where they are. They're 2 towns over. Yeah. So I had to call work, say, I lost my keys last night. I have to go track them down. They all laughed at me. So I took the day off. Drove back, borrowed somebody's vehicle, drove there to try and track down my keys. So I started off at the restaurant we'd been at. They weren't open yet, so I had to wait a while for them to open. They opened, I went, checked, no keys. Okay. And I'm like, well, we went and got ice cream after. So I went to this place we'd gotten ice cream, no keys. Well, oh crap, we walked through a park to get from restaurant to ice cream shop. So retrace my steps, getting more and more despondent at this point, thinking that my keys are definitely gone forever. Retrace my steps, can't find it, and then have this oh shit realization that I no longer do this, but I historically would hook my keys in my back pocket, which everybody told me you shouldn't do that, you're going to lose your keys. But I did it anyways. I remembered that we sat on this bench in a different area of the park at one point eating the ice cream, and I was like, oh crap, like that, got hooked, whatever, fell out there. So I go over there, at this point pretty convinced I'm not going to find them. Very concerned because it was not just my truck keys, like it's a key to everything important in my life, right? Not there. Now, this park was on a corner, and it happened to be kind of where a lot of the houseless population of the city would congregate at that point in time in the day. So I thought, you know what? Last-ditch effort, I am going to go see if anybody found them. So I walk up to this group, and hey, sorry to bug you. I think I dropped my keys in this park last night. Not super convinced. I don't know any chance that anybody has seen them. They kind of, hey, no. Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate your time. I start walking away, and I hear, wait! Somebody's got my keys. So I turn around, and this woman is kind of hustling over to me, and she asked me to describe the keys, and I described them, and she said, I know where your keys are. And I said, okay. Did not expect this, was fully convinced at this point that my keys were gone forever. And her name was Linda. I will never forget Linda's name. And so Linda says, I know who has your keys. Twinkie's got your keys. And I was like, I don't know how you do this, but you're amazing. Where's Twinkie? Where can I find Twinkie? So she starts looking around the park, and she said, oh, he's gone, but so-and-so said he left, and he usually goes here next. I don't know where this place is. So I said, okay, what time? And she shared what time Twinkie usually comes back to their location. So I decided I'm just going to hang out at the park and wait for Twinkie. In the meantime, I hang out with Linda because this is one of the coolest people I've ever met in my life, just on my brief interaction with her. So we end up spending hours together that day, just hanging out on a bench, her and her dog, and just getting to know each other. And she had the coolest experiences. Now, I'm talking a couple hours had passed, and she started to get frustrated because Twinkie wasn't back per his usual timeline. So she says that she is going to go find Twinkie. Now, she kind of suddenly decides this and says, watch my stuff. I'm going to go find Twinkie. Now, this woman, I didn't have time. I'm start trying to object because she literally leaves this basket with me with all of her worldly possessions and her dog. And I'm feeling this wave of panic that I can't be responsible. What if she doesn't come back at the exact time? How do I find it? I cannot be the one responsible for this. Like, and she's gone. So, okay. There was a bus stop right there at this park, too. And I don't know how often buses cycle through, but every, 15, 20 minutes, individuals would get off the bus, and I could hear the conversation. Yo, haven't seen Twinkie. The whole town was literally looking for my keys.
I'm trying so hard to hold this in, but I love this story. Okay, keep going.
I would hear them check in with each other. Yo, Twinkie wasn't here. Hey, Twinkie wasn't here. And I'm like, this is amazing. Now, they had described Twinkie to me, so I could also keep an eye out for him. I'm sitting on this bench. I probably would say maybe 45 minutes have gone by since Linda left to go find Twinkie. And I see this kid on a bike, and they had described him as having a bike, and they had described him physically and what he was wearing. And this kid comes around the corner like a block and a half away from me. And I'm like, ooh, this kind of looks like Twinkie. And I'm watching, and this kid whips around a corner on his bike, and my key lanyard flies out from his pocket, right? And I can see it. It's like lit up by the sun and everything, right? And I'm like, that's Twinkie. And he turns, and he was headed away from me. And I like jump up, like I don't know what I thought I was going to do, like chase this kid on a bike. And then I look at all of Linda's worldly possessions and her dog, and I'm like, I can't leave this, right? So I sit back down and I watch my keys just ride into the sunset. It wasn't sunset, but I'm like, oh, that was so close, right? So another couple hours go by. I don't know. Time, it was literally an entire day, so I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say a couple hours. I was there from probably 7:30 a.m. to evening, late afternoon. And eventually, I hear kind of some rumblings of conversation. I turn and look, and around this building comes Linda and Twinkie. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, right? So I grab her stuff and her dog, and I kind of meet them halfway. And she says, here's Twinkie. Twinkie's got your keys. And Twinkie asked me to describe them. I totally understand, right? I described them. He said, all right, they're yours. And he handed them back to me. And I just had this moment of, this is a woman that just gave up her entire day to go find a stranger's keys. And this woman, I figured out later where she went. I mean, we're talking she went miles, right, across town at various locations to track Twinkie down. And we went to Jack in the Box and had some tacos together after, all of us, because, and I compensated them as well for their time, because they didn't have to, nobody there had to do that, right? Literally everybody was involved. I'm not kidding when I said people would get off the bus with updates on where Twinkie was and wasn't, and it was just the coolest experience I think that I've probably ever had in many ways. And I don't know why that didn't pop up, because that is one of the best days of my life in terms of humanity, and it was just the coolest experience. So goodness and kindness is out there everywhere, literally everywhere. It's just whether or not we slow down enough to see it and interact with it.
And little did Linda know that 5 to 7 years later, she was going to end up on the Therapists Uncut podcast.
Yeah. I keep an eye out for this woman anytime I'm anywhere, because I would love nothing more than to see her again, because she was an amazing human.
As always, thank you for joining us today on the Therapists Uncut podcast and helping us make mental health relatable and a part of your everyday conversation. For show notes and more information on our TU crew, go to therapistuncut.com, and we'll see you next time.
And do some good. Do some good out there.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.